Welcome to Outside Views, where today we're exploring the largely hidden but incredibly influential body behind a pivotal part of Brexit implementation, the Specialised Committee on the Implementation of the Windsor Framework. This committee, often overlooked in mainstream discussions, has been tasked with ensuring that the Windsor Framework, a central component of the UK-EU relationship post-Brexit, operates as intended. Now, for many of us, committees are just small bodies working behind the scenes, making sure that policies and agreements run smoothly. But this specialized committee is different. Its role is far from routine, and it has a level of influence that most people may not fully realize. This committee is essentially the glue holding together the agreement known as the Windsor Framework, which was designed to address the sensitive and contentious issue of Northern Ireland's place within the UK and the EU's regulatory reach. So why was this committee created? For this, let's take a step back. When Brexit came into effect, Northern Ireland was left in a unique position. Geographically, it's part of the United Kingdom, but due to its land border with the Republic of Ireland, which is an EU member state, Northern Ireland found itself at the intersection of two different regulatory systems. The question of how to manage the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland became one of the biggest hurdles during Brexit negotiations. No one wanted a hard border, but ensuring that goods could move freely while respecting both UK and EU regulations was no simple feat. The Windsor Framework was a solution to the dilemma of the Northern Ireland Protocol that was invented for this, aiming to balance both sides' interests. And under this framework, the Northern Ireland remains aligned with certain EU single market rules while still being a part of the UK's customs territory. But the question then became, who would manage the delicate implementation of this framework that was to repair some parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol? And that's where the Specialised Committee comes into play. This committee has the monumental task of overseeing the framework's day-to-day function, ensuring compliance, addressing disputes, and adapting the framework to any new challenges that may arise. The committee's work impacts businesses, government agencies, and citizens in Northern Ireland on a very real, everyday level, and yet it's largely unknown to the public. What's fascinating is that the committee operates almost entirely outside the public eye, quietly resolving issues that, if mishandled, could disrupt trade and political stability. The members of this committee come from both the UK and the EU, representing a mix of legal, technical, and political expertise. They meet at regular intervals to assess how the Windsor Framework is performing, making adjustments as needed on both the Windsor Framework and the Northern Ireland Protocol. And to give you an idea of the level of power this committee holds, it can essentially modify parts of the framework by mutual agreement. In other words, the committee has the authority to interpret, adapt, and even change specific elements of the Windsor Framework without the need for a full renegotiation. And this is an immense amount of power. For example, if a particular trade regulation or requirement under the framework is found to be problematic for businesses in Northern Ireland, the committee can work to amend it to ease those burdens. Likewise, if new issues emerge, say related to agriculture, environmental standards, or consumer goods, the committee has the flexibility to adapt the framework as these issues arise. And this flexibility is crucial because Northern Ireland's regulatory situation is incredibly complex. Businesses operating there are under a unique blend of UK and EU rules, which can lead to unexpected regulatory hurdles. It's not just about rules for goods or tariffs, it's about standards, labeling, environmental regulations, and countless other factors that influence how trade is conducted. Without the committee's oversight, the framework could easily become an unworkable patchwork of conflicting requirements. It's no exaggeration to say that this committee holds the power to make or break the smooth functioning of trade between Northern Ireland, the rest of the UK, and the EU. One recent example highlights just how critical this committee's role is. A few months ago, there was a dispute over certain food products moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And these products were subjected to complex checks under the EU sanitary and phytosanitary regulations. For businesses, these checks added cost and time and making trade more difficult. And the Specialised Committee intervened, working out the agreement that eased these restrictions without compromising standards. And this may sound minor, but for the businesses involved, it made a substantial difference. And the committee's role here isn't just regulatory, it is economic. They have the ability to smooth out the kinks in the system, ensuring that trade continues without disruptions while still respecting the integrity of both the UK and EU laws. And this kind of mediation might seem mundane, but it's essential for maintaining stability in Northern Ireland, where even small disruptions can have significant political and social impacts. So, what happens when there's a disagreement within the committee itself? After all, UK and EU interests don't always align, and the committee's members represent both sides. In these cases, the committee has the authority to escalate issues to a higher body, the Joint Committee on the Withdrawal Agreement. The Joint Committee, which has oversight of the entire Brexit agreement, is the ultimate arbiter if the Specialised Committee can't reach consensus. But even with this escalation route in place, the Specialised Committee has managed to resolve most issues internally. And this speaks to the level of trust and cooperation that both sides have managed to build within this framework. Not on the broader scale, but right there. Interestingly, the committee's influence extends beyond just managing current issues. It's also shaping the future relationship between the UK and the EU. By constantly tweaking and fine-tuning the Windsor Framework, they're effectively creating a precedent for how the UK and the EU can cooperate on other complex regulatory issues down the line. And there's even talk that the committee's model could serve as a blueprint for future agreements, particularly in areas where the UK and the EU have overlapping interests but separate regulatory system. And while the committee's work is largely unseen, it has a real and direct impact on people's lives. For businesses in Northern Ireland, the Specialised Committee's decisions can mean the difference between compliance headaches and smooth operations. For consumers, it means access to a broader range of goods without inflated costs due to regulatory issues. For politicians, especially in Northern Ireland, the committee's work affects the region's stability and, by extension, the peace that has been so hard won. And yet, despite this far-reaching influence, public awareness of the Specialised Committee is minimal. Its meetings aren't publicized, its decisions aren't widely reported. It operates in the shadows, so to speak, despite holding the fate of Northern Ireland's trade arrangements in its hands. So what's next for this powerful but unknown body? With Brexit negotiations ongoing and the relationship between the UK and the EU constantly evolving, the role of the Specialised Committee is only going to grow in importance. And as we move forward to the next stages of Brexit implementation, particularly in sensitive areas like Northern Ireland, the committee will continue to serve as a stabilizing force. But the big question remains, will this model of quiet cooperation and specialized oversight hold? Or will the pressures of diverging UK and EU interests eventually reach a point where the committee's influence is no longer sufficient? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear. The Specialised Committee on the implementation of the Windsor Framework is more than just a bureaucratic body. It's a critical component in the post-Brexit landscape, one that holds real power and ultimately the potential to shape the future of UK-EU relations. And as we continue To monitor the complexities of Brexit, let's not overlook the roles played by committees like this, because often it's the quiet actors working behind the scenes who hold the keys to lasting solutions or lasting complications. And for now, the Specialized Committee seems poised to be both. And if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.